I remember you could not say that you were tired around me because I would be like, what do you mean you're tired? I haven't slept in 2 years. You're not tired. You don't know what tired is. I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is our society isn't designed for us to thrive. The work week needs to be cut down to 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think is interesting about the nonprofit world specifically is that often there is an additional layer of guilt when your identity matches the identities of the communities you're serving. If this school doesn't work, where are they going to go to school? What is going to be their experience at school? Are they going to end up on the school to prison pipeline? That was another layer of guilt that I was living with.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Self Care Oasis podcast. Your host, Samantha Gregory, here, the Self Care Alchemist. And today, my guest is Vanity Jenkins. She is agreed to be on our podcast today to share a little bit of her story, how she's gone through burnout, her process, and how she is now increasing capacity for herself in her business and her personal life. So, welcome, Vanity. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I love what you are doing with the podcast, and so happy to join you and be a guest.
So, as always, I ask my guests to introduce themselves, tell us who you are, what you do, and how you're changing the world. And then we'll get right into our conversation.
Awesome. So, like Samantha mentioned, my name is Vanity Jenkins. I'm a single mom. I'm a sister, a friend, a daughter, and a business owner. I have been a business owner for 5 years. I've been full time for almost 3 years. Started my career in education, started off as a teacher, and then became a coach, ended up working for several nonprofits at just about every level, from entry level to the C-suite. Was also an executive director and founded a charter school. Eventually, I needed just a break. I know we're going to talk about burnout. A lot of my burnout came from nonprofits. And so decided to bet on myself and go full time in my business.
Well, thank you for sharing part of your story because, yes, we are definitely going to get into the burnout part of it. But I know from firsthand experience that being a single mom can also be a source of burnout because you're doing it basically on your own. And it's wonderful if you have a support system. I had a semi-support system when they were younger, but of course, as they got older, they became more independent. Then the responsibilities lessened. But the physical responsibilities lessen, but the mental, emotional responsibilities increase. In terms of being not just a parent, but an employee, how did you even juggle that? And where did you start to feel the life start to crack for you?
That is a loaded question. My daughter is 11, and so I'm in that preteen phase right now. And so
Mm,
I'm definitely feeling that although there's the independence, it is a lot more emotionally taxing than when she was younger. When my daughter was born, I was at a nonprofit. I was an entry level employee at that nonprofit. By the time that she was 4, I had been promoted 3 times.
mm,
So went from being an individual contributor to leading 5 teams and being a part of the C-suite.
mm.
I remember I also breastfed for 2.5 years, which is just very wild. Now that I think back on it,
Mhm.
I remember you could not say that you were tired around me because I would be like, what do you mean you're tired? I haven't slept in 2 years. You're not tired. You don't know what tired is, right? Just like flipping out. And so I remember there was a point where my boss at the time, a man who had also had a child, maybe about 6 months younger than my daughter, and he was reading this book about sleep and just talking
Mm.
about how important it was to sleep and how you just can't sacrifice sleep. I needed to prioritize it. And I'm looking at him like, yeah, I'm sure you can prioritize your sleep with your wife and your nanny. I have
That
no
part.
time to sleep. I don't even know. It likely was burnout at that point because I literally did not sleep through the night for 2 years,
Mhm.
2.5 years, but wasn't even naming it or addressing it, right? It was just in that mode where, yep, I'm making more money. This is going to set my daughter up for a better life. It's going to set me up for a better life. So I just have to keep moving and keep pushing. In those early stages, probably from the time she was 0 to about 3, maybe even 4, I was just functioning on fumes and making it
Mm.
work, like not realizing how tired I was, not taking breaks, not setting boundaries, just doing all of the things because Sometimes that's just the season that you're in, and that's the reality that you are given. She didn't spend a night away from me in those two and a
Mm,
half years. I was feeding her throughout the night every 3, 4 hours. I'm sure I was tired. I'm sure I was exhausted, but sometimes you don't realize that until after you've gotten through it.
mhm,
Since then, I will say I have been better about boundaries and about time, but it is still hard as a single parent
mm,
because you want to make sure that your child isn't lacking anything. And so, even if you draw a boundary at work and you stop working at a certain time, you still have to play, cook
mm,
dinner, clean up the house, and give them attention. And so, there was not a lot of time, probably until she got to be around 8 or 9, and the independence really kind of flourished, where I had time for myself.
mhm,
And I did start being able to plan trips and, spend time away where she could stay with trusted family, which was helpful. But a week or 2 week vacation out of 365 days is still not that much.
mhm,
It's not. And so have definitely had to just learn how to get my needs met in different situations. I've picked up hobbies, which I'm really proud about. And so, I make sure that I have time to read now. I make sure I'm starting to learn how to crochet. I am not very good at all, but have found things where I can have time away from doom scrolling, away from TV or any type of inputs, and just to have time with myself. I'm also an introvert, and so I often warn people that being an introverted parent is hard because your child wants to be around you. Like my daughter likes to still sit on my lap or just be in my space. There are often times where I feel overwhelmed just by touch or someone talking to you and would rather sit in a quiet, dark room by myself. But as a parent, I don't want to give my child issues around attachment or any of those things. Even when
mhm.
I am overwhelmed by touch, if she wants to hug, I'm always going to hug her, right? If she wants to sit with me, she's always allowed to sit with me or sit on my lap, whatever. But it is hard as an
Mm.
introvert when you just want that quiet time or that time alone.
Yes, ma'am. I get it because I am too an introvert and I understand the energy drain that not just happens from work, but from parenting, from the connection that your child wants. And it's not a bad thing. It's normal. They should want that. And being
Right.
able to give them that is a gift, literally, that introverts give to
Right.
their children. Because I tell you, one thing, like when I would commute a lot, from work to home, pick up the kids, make sure that they're settled. And then I would just literally say, look, I'm going to take 5 minutes.
Yep.
I'm going to go in my room, I'm going to lay on my bed, and I'm going to need some silence and some alone time.
Yep.
And I feel like that was really instrumental in helping them understand that it's okay to
Yep.
have alone time. It's okay, but you still will have together time. We will have as much together time as you want. But I just need this 5 minutes right now.
Yep. Yep.
So and that's not to say, I mean, that wasn't like the cure-all for the burnout, but
Right. Right.
it was a step in the right direction. And like
Yeah.
you, I definitely didn't know how to name that I was in burnout. My body told me later on. I think that's one thing as an introverted single parent where you tend to be more susceptible to burnout
Yep.
because your battery is just not recharged through external stimulation. It is so very
Yep.
internal.
Yeah. I think one of the things that we don't talk about enough is our society isn't designed for us to thrive.
Right.
I remember when we were on lockdown from COVID, and so I'm cooking 3 meals a day, cleaning up, and I remember having the reflection of how was I doing this before when I had to take her to school,
Mhm.
get to work, still figure out what we're going to eat? Because I remember being exhausted just from cooking 3 meals a day and cleaning up the house. There wasn't time for me to have 5 minutes to myself just from doing that one thing. I think sometimes people have conversations around the 40-hour work week. We don't talk about the fact that we had to fight to get 40 hours. We don't talk about the fact that so much of our society is built on the nuclear family. Two parents at home, one who technically is not supposed to be working because they're supposed to be doing all of the house things. The
Right.
other person is supposed to be the one working and making the money, but we have outgrown that. And now in most households, both families are working. If you do have a two-parent household, if you're a single parent and you have the one person who is now responsible for all of that work, we are just not set up to be able to do that well and to thrive. The work week needs to be cut down to 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
But we are just not built for success or to thrive and survive with all of the expectations put on people. I have one child. I am always amazed by people who have multiple children. I think we need to really have some tough conversations and think about the way society and work and family are structured so that we can create more opportunities for people to really be able to thrive.
You're so right. We're in an individualistic society that celebrates the nuclear family, but that's all about separation. You don't have that community aspect anymore. If we had that community mindset, even single parents would still get that support. They would have people around them who could help with meal planning, childcare, and the social emotional needs we have as adults when we feel overwhelmed, and we'll have this outlet. And so everything is not piled on us, and then add in the guilt that they try to make single parents feel, especially single mothers feel, because they, for whatever reason, don't have a partner who's going to be there to help. We know they're not helping, even in the home, and there's a lot of married single mothers.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
that's the reality of it.
Absolutely agree with everything you shared.
And so in your life, your career, the burnout that you started to feel in your work that made you want to pivot into starting your own business. So, what was that like? And when did you have the realization that this is not working and I need to do something different?
Yeah, so I was an executive founding a charter school. One, that is a hard thing to do at any point. I opened
Mm,
a charter school during COVID, so harder than you really can imagine. And I gave myself permission to acknowledge. I've always been a person who has surpassed my goals very easily in whatever job that I'm in. And so just kept pushing myself to figure it out, to be able to do more, to figure out how to make this work, even when I saw that the setup I was in was not conducive to surviving, not even thriving, right? But still just pushing myself. You can do more. You can do more. You can figure it out. You can figure it out. Hired a team of predominantly Black women, incredible folks, and they were right there with me, right? We all had on the Superwoman cape trying to figure out how to make this school work, how to make sure we're supporting the kids and the families. One of the things that I think is interesting about the nonprofit world specifically is that often there is an additional layer of guilt when
mm,
your identity matches the identities of the communities you're serving, right? And so I'm opening a charter school for Black children, low income Black children, right? So understanding what their families are going through, getting to know their families on a really deep level. That's an additional layer of, well, if you don't figure it out, where are they going to go to school, right?
mhm, mhm,
At my school, we had a no suspension policy, which I think every school should have for the age levels that we have. But it doesn't mean that we were without challenging behaviors. We had a lot of students who had very challenging behaviors, and I still wasn't going to suspend them. If this school doesn't work, where are they going to go to school? What is going to be their experience at school? Are they going to end up on the school to prison pipeline? That was
mhm,
another layer of guilt that I was living with. But I didn't actually recognize the burnout until I felt it from my family. And
mhm,
so I'm also an eldest daughter. I think I mentioned that at the beginning. And so that's a whole nother layer of expectations, of commitments, of making sure people are talking to each other, supporting people
mhm,
financially, and being the go-to problem solver. As I started to notice the burnout and stress from work, I went to my family first, like, hey, I am struggling. I need help. I'm dealing with XYZ. And to not be met with the support that I had given everyone just made the burnout spiral. At the time, I was the executive director of a charter school. I was in a PhD program full time, and I was running my business on the side. I'm doing
mhm,
all these things while being a single parent. I start to feel like I'm drowning, talk to family, and they're kind of like, you'll figure it out. Very non-committal in terms of support. Overcapacity ended up being very depressed and having to work with a therapist to come out of that depression. That's when we were able to recognize you are actually burned out. You have probably been
Mhm.
burnt out for years. Even when I think back now, I'm like, how are you taking 3 courses, working full time, and running a business while still taking your daughter to ballet and to theater and making sure there's dinner, right? Like
Mhm.
literally, I cannot fathom it now. But when I was in the moment, I was doing it and
Yeah.
getting A's, right? Figuring it out in the moment. And so had to really understand that often what is burnout for me,
Mhm.
other people have been burned out for months or years before that. So
Right.
even at my burnout, I was operating at a very, very high level.
Mhm.
Even with my anxiety that I found out I had, I'm operating at a very, very high level. And so had to get really clear on boundary setting, ensuring that the relationships I was a part of were reciprocal, making sure that I had time for joy and for the things that I wanted. My friends during that time were really incredible and very supportive. But I had to take a break from my family. I didn't talk to some folks for an extended period of time
Mhm.
because I needed to be able to heal myself.
I get it. You're telling my story. Being the oldest child, oldest daughter, I think sets you up for this overachiever lifestyle. Being an introvert, we're thinkers. We're the ones who just get it done. The layer upon layer of responsibility, guilt, anxiety, all the things. Excellence is the thing that's been stamped on our head. So you just do it because you can. And the busier you are, the more you take on because, well, I'm doing this, I might as well do that. People would ask me the same thing. How are you doing all these things? You're raising 2 kids. You're in school, because I was also in grad school. I was also working full time. I was taking care of my kids and had a side business as well. So I understand you, Vanity. I understand you. But our level of burnout or the recognition that we're in burnout, something has to happen in
Mhm.
order for us. There has, what is it called? Not a defining moment, but there's this trigger point where
Yep.
everything kind of just implodes and you're like, I can't do it anymore.
Yep.
So I'm glad you got to that point, but how much sooner could I have gotten to this point if I had been paying
Right.
attention
Right.
to myself? But because you growing up as a eldest daughter, everyone else is first.
Yep.
Everyone else's needs, and then being a parent that just compounds that, and then being an executive director that even that you so you had a triple whammy of
Mhm.
responsibility and sources of guilt and shame
Yep.
that drove you to continue even though your body was screaming, even though your
Yep.
mind was like, I'm breaking.
Absolutely.
So making the decision to leave all of that behind and focus solely on your business,
Mhm.
was there a defining moment that you said, okay, this is no longer working and I'm making a change?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I was struggling with some pretty deep depression.
Mhm.
We opened the school in the middle of COVID and we're not set up financially the way we needed to be in order for the school to thrive and flourish. The quick story I always tell people is the first time I saw the budget was March of 2021. We opened that August.
Mhm.
There was $11,000 in the budget to furnish the entire school. So classrooms, cafeteria, lunch, nurses' room, gymnasium. And if you're not familiar with schools, it typically costs about $20,000 to furnish one classroom.
Mhm.
And we had $11,000 for the school. Like I mentioned, I had a team of predominantly Black women. We got the school furnished and we were able to open with all of the things that the kids needed, the office furniture, the furniture in the nurse's room, the library, the cafeteria, the classrooms. But it was incredibly hard and we just were not set up for success. Ultimately, we had to close the school in 2023. Going through that, hearing parents crying and begging us to keep the school open, wanting to do that, but knowing we needed $1 million. I don't have $1 million. There's no one in my network that had $1 million to give us. And so that really is what sent me into depression. As I was walking through that with my therapist and healing from the depression, I never meant to do my business full time. My mindset was always, I'm a single mom, I need health insurance, I need a full time job. But as I was learning how to set boundaries, as I was learning how to give myself and my body what it needed, every time I talked to a recruiter about a new job, or every time someone told me to apply for a certain job, I could feel my body tense and
Mhm.
recoil. I could feel my heart start beating faster. And now, if you mentioned a job in a school, I'm literally breaking out into a sweat and hives, right? My body is telling me that this is not it.
Right.
And even though I am scared, I just have to figure something else out. Now, initially, again, I'm like health insurance, job, my daughter, right? Just has always been my mindset. And I'm also a very spiritual person. So I was doing a lot of praying and felt like God was telling me, you just got to trust me and do your
Mhm.
business. I'm sitting there like, no, there is no way I can make enough money to pay our bills and to pay for health insurance. Health insurance was always a thing for me. I
Right.
cannot imagine paying for it myself. And so eventually I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to take this leap of faith. I'm going to take this step. And once I did, things just started lining up perfectly. I was like, okay, I see what you're doing. Even though I didn't want to listen,
Yeah.
a lot of it was that control piece, right?
Mhm.
I could not see the path for me to be able to make enough money on my own. And so I had to let go of that. I had to trust my body. I had to listen spiritually in order for me to be able to make that decision.
I love that. It is absolutely a leap of faith to believe and really trust yourself that you can do this and that when you leap, the net will appear. I used to hate that phrase. I'm like,
Yep.
what are you saying to me, right? Because clearly you don't know my situation. I don't
Right.
have a safety net, someone else's income to until I figure this out. This is all on me. But now you're here. You said you started 5 years ago and you've been full-time 3 years, right?
Yep. Yep. 3 years.
How do you feel now in terms of your nervous system? Do you feel your burnout is completely subsided, or do you still feel some residual from it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it has subsided. There have been moments where I can feel it creeping up,
Mhm.
but I know how to listen to my body in ways that I didn't know before.
Mhm.
One of the things that I do as a coach is help women of color learn how to connect with their bodies and learn how to
Mhm.
listen to what our body is signaling for us. If I have butterflies in my stomach, for example, that usually is telling me you need to say what you're thinking and not just leave it in your head. You need to take a
Mhm.
moment of faith and say this hard thing in this
Right.
meeting. It might make you uncomfortable, but that is what that is telling me. Anytime that I am just sleeping every weekend, don't feel like I want to get out of bed. I'm only really getting out of bed to make sure my daughter has what she needs. I
Mhm.
know that that's a signal that I'm probably doing too much. Now, I'm going to speak candidly about some things here, so feel
Yeah,
free to cut it if it's inappropriate.
no worries.
But one of the things that I also noticed when I was in the midst of burnout is that I was drinking a lot and I
Mhm.
was also smoking a lot of weed.
Mhm.
And that was my coping mechanism for how I could have the little pieces of joy in my
Sure.
day because I wasn't experiencing them. And so I've told my friends, if you notice me smoking regularly or drinking regularly, that is also a signal because I actually
Mhm.
don't do that. Like, I'm not a social drinker or
Sure.
someone who needs to smoke daily or even weekly, but I was doing both of those things daily
Okay.
because it was a way for me to cope. So
Mhm.
that's another trigger or warning for me that something else is wrong that I need to investigate more deeply,
Mhm.
because that's just not who I am. I have fun and I'm happy without those things.
Right.
And then exercise is another one. When I feel like I am aligned, I am exercising regularly. Now I might be walking. Right now I go to Burn Boot Camp. I love it
Mhm.
there. When my depression hit, I had just lost like 25 pounds.
Mhm.
And once it hit, was eating, drinking, smoking, all of the things and gained that weight back. So that's another warning for me to recognize that something might be happening if I'm not exercising regularly.
Okay. Those are very good signs, and I will absolutely keep this in because I think a lot of people are dealing with substances to help them cope with
Yep.
burnout, depression, whatever it may be. And that's the reality
Yep.
of life and being in this space, being a woman, being a Black woman with a lot of pressure. And it's
Yep.
like, how do you relieve this pressure? And those, so there's many ways, you have the healthy way and then maybe the unhealthy way. Dealing with those things and even recognizing it, recognizing your body signals as you mentioned before, because I think a lot of Black women are so disconnected from their bodies
Yep.
because we've been taught to be smart, think,
Yep.
always
To be
analyze.
rational.
Yes,
Yep.
be
Yep.
rational,
Yep.
analyze things, and then make a decision. But this is just me, my own testimony. I was so disconnected from my body I didn't even recognize or know when I was in pain. I recognized physical pain, but
Right.
just the the depth of the emotional pain that I was in
Yep.
because I wasn't paying attention because I was taught not to trust my body.
Yep.
And I think that's a big thing for women, Black women specifically. We've been taught as from a child, don't trust your body. It will betray you. It
Mhm.
is a object that other people will try to take advantage of. And so that disconnect is there. If you come from the school that I came from, it was always keep your head in the books and your legs closed.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
I didn't realize how I had just completely cut it all off and only did maintenance on my body, but not connect or be in alignment with it.
Yeah. And there's also such a level of guilt that we are given for resting, right?
Right.
Resting is being lazy. Taking time for yourself is being selfish. And when
Hmm.
we've talked about being eldest daughters and mothers who are also putting other people ahead of your needs. Don't even have the option to listen to your body because your sister needs you, or your brother needs you, your
Hmm.
child needs you, or your direct report needs you. Someone always needs you. So you don't even have time to listen. I
Right.
think one of the things that I have learned is in order for me to even know what my body is saying or communicating, I have to make space for that. I remember when I was an executive, I would have back-to-back meetings, just
Right.
back go from one thing to the next, right?
Yes.
And now I make sure that I never have anything back to back because I at least need 15 minutes to just sit there, process what happened, see if I'm having a feeling, see if
Right.
I'm having an emotion. And sometimes I'm not. Sometimes
Hmm.
it's just 15 minutes to go on a walk, right?
Hmm.
Or to go to the bathroom, scroll on Instagram, do whatever. I have the flexibility now as an entrepreneur to set up my calendar in a way that works for me. Where when I was an employee, I didn't have that flexibility, right? Once you start,
Hmm.
I had an assistant who was managing my calendar. So I didn't even have the control. I could have told them change XYZ, but sometimes I'm walking into a meeting and I don't even know what the meeting is about or who I'm meeting
Hmm.
with because it's
Hmm.
been changed the night before and I didn't look at my calendar. And so there's just so many things where I am able to be really intentional about my
Hmm.
time now. I used to be just on the run, drop my daughter off as early as possible, get to the office, start working, come pick her up. And now I take her to school. I have a block on my calendar about an hour and a half because we might get there early, we might get there
Hmm.
late, as long as she's there before school starts.
Sure.
I go to a coffee shop, I slowly ease into my day, do some meditation, drinking my
Hmm.
coffee, being more intentional with my time so that I can show up for myself, so I can be there for myself and be the advocate that I am for other people, for
Hmm.
myself first. I also keep my phone on do not disturb. That is a big thing that came from boundary setting for me
Yes.
because now I haven't been diagnosed, but I am confident that I have ADHD. I need to get diagnosed. But I am literally like a rabbit. If my phone is not on do not disturb, if I hear one sound, I got to stop what
Right.
I'm doing and go see it. Then another sound, I have to do
Hmm.
this. Keeping my phone on do not disturb has been such a release because I control when I look at it, when
Hmm.
I want to engage and when I don't. I joke with people all the time. I put my phone on do not disturb one day and then I was like, when do I want to be disturbed? I don't ever
Right.
want to be disturbed. So it stays on there 24/7.
Wow, I get it. I think as an introvert, the overstimulation of
Yeah.
social
Yeah.
media, all the things that are pulling at your attention, people don't realize that it's not just people coming at you, it's sounds, it's noise, it's all those
Mhm.
things that literally start to drain your battery during the day. If you don't take back control of that, then you're going to find yourself just zombie-like
Yep.
before 3 o'clock. I know for me, I just turned all the notification sounds off
Hmm.
on my phone so that social media, I wouldn't get that constant Pavlov's dog kind of
Right.
reaction every time you hear a sound or a ding, pick up your phone and start looking. That was really stressing me out. Let me just put everything on. Either I take it off my phone completely or I
Right.
turn off the notifications or they may be silent or something like that. And I just look at it when I'm ready, like you said.
Yep.
But I may try to do not disturb more often because I really don't need to be seeing who's trying to contact me or what's happening
Exactly.
other than when I'm ready. So I think that's amazing. I've loved this conversation and I would love for you to share more about your business. You did kind of share a little bit about it, but just more about your business, how you're helping women. I know you with somatic practices, but
Yep.
also specifically, what do you do in your business and what do you have now that people can, engage with, download, and where can they find you online?
So the name of my business is Shifted Consulting. You can find me at Shifted Consulting on Instagram and Facebook. And then my website is shiftedconsulting.com. And I really primarily focus on three things. So one is leadership development coaching, primarily for women of color. I do coach everybody, but most of my clients are women of color. And we really focus on helping women lead in a values aligned way. So, identifying what your values are and making sure you are able to show up aligned to those values in your role that you currently have, maybe a role that you want. I do career coaching sometimes for people who are looking for a new job, business coaching for those who want to open their own businesses. But really, it's about helping people live a values aligned life where their values are taking center stage in terms of their decision making and where they feel like they are living a life where they can thrive. I also work directly with organizations around organizational culture. So a lot of times that is supporting the HR teams or supporting the executive leadership teams with ensuring that the organizational culture is one where all people can thrive. I deeply believe that everyone deserves to have a great manager. Everyone deserves to have a role that they love, but those things don't happen by accident. You have to have strategy. And I know we've heard the quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Hmm.
I kind of agree with that quote, but really for me, your culture needs a strategy.
Yeah.
Culture doesn't happen by chance. It doesn't happen just because you want it to be great or because you think everybody are friends or are aligned. You have to have a strategy for your culture and how that is going to happen in the workplace. Processes and procedures, your handbook, the way you meet, all of those things need a culture strategy. And so I help organizations with that. The third component, I'm the co founder of a fellowship called Authentically Me for women of color. Currently, we run it twice a year for anybody to join, but we also have worked with different organizations where they have it inside of their organization and they have up to 14 women of color join and go through the experience together. Those are the main ways that I do my work. And you can find any of that information on either my LinkedIn page, Vanity Jenkins, or on my website.
Awesome. You're doing great work. I love it. And we'll have all the links to your social media, your website, so that people can go and check out in more detail what you do and how you can help them with personal leadership, career, business, and company culture. I'm so thankful that we had a chance to have this conversation, Vanity. I think that a lot of people who are listening, whether they're single parents, whether they're overwhelmed with corporate work, whether they're starting their business, they can get nuggets and lessons from you based off how you have handled it. And I think the way we handle burnout really does matter because a lot of people can hide from it and you've had that side of it, but you also went, more a healthy route with therapy, with somatic body work and being able to share that with your audience and your clients. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your story and being vulnerable. I think that's amazing and that's what we need more of.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm so grateful for the work you are doing to support women and people who are struggling with self-care. Society is not built for us to care for ourselves, which it shouldn't be, but that is another conversation for another day.
Absolutely. And hopefully we can have another conversation as well. Thank you. And thank you again, everyone who listened to this episode or watched us on YouTube. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow on all our social media from Substack on my Self Care Oasis, YouTube, LinkedIn, and TikTok. So all our links will be in our description below. Until next time, take care, be well, and follow your bliss. Take care.